There's a lot of conversation happening lately around student reading stamina. Rose Horowitz's Atlantic article, "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books," helped stir the pot. I'm sure you've seen evidence of the same issues that she brings up, that students are struggling to stay focused through books and often come to you having read a lot of excerpts and short pieces rather than full novels. Test prep, phone culture, COVID. There are all kinds of reasons, but the bottom line for you as a teacher is, what can you do about it? Today's request for our new Plan My Lesson series comes from a teacher looking for ways to help her students build their reading stamina. She is wondering how she can help her students work toward longer reads and more of them. Perhaps you're wondering the same? This is a big question, and we're just planning one lesson. But let's zoom in on a snapshot of a class that could help students on the journey toward longer, more engaged reading sessions. We'll start, like the Odyssey, in medias res. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy. And no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So let's start by picturing the classroom. We need to talk about the space we're in. If a major goal of the class is to build student reading stamina, that space can be a huge help. When you look around over at the bookshelves, ideally you're going to see a class library full of student favorites, possibly organized by genre with little colorful genre cards. Popular titles are going to be pulled out and displayed on the tops of the shelves, maybe across the windowsills. Bookmarks are sticking out of the top of some of those books with little recommendation blurbs from previous readers. You might see one of those fun displays along the whiteboard tray with a theme like better than the movie, and then book blurbs just sort of scrawled in whiteboard marker above the book. It's the kind of display that takes 3 minutes to create, that you can change out really quickly. On the walls, it would be great to see book posters, maybe book covers, book selfies, all featuring reads of the class, books that kids want to recommend to other kids or books that the teacher wants to recommend to kids. Maybe if you have class digital access like your one-to-one or you have some class iPads, a QR poster might lead students to a digital bookshelf featuring popular audiobooks and ebooks, which students can access through the school electronic library system or the local electronic library system. Now, Lighthouse members, you're going to find support for all of this kind of thing in our choice reading section. Of course, you can also create these kinds of things yourselves. Okay, so let's put today's lesson in context a little bit. Let's imagine that students have started the year with shorter, high-interest pieces. You did a performance poetry unit. You did a short story unit with some of your very favorite short stories. You guys have listened to some podcasts. You've looked at excerpts of longer books, but you haven't quite dived into a full-length read because your students don't have a lot of reading stamina. That's the issue for today's class. But at the same time that you've been reading these short pieces, you've been starting to try to build up interest in your choice reading program. You've gotten everyone started with reading just 10 minutes a day of the book of their choice. You've been checking in with them to see how it's going, helping sub in new books for kids who aren't liking their books. You've been giving a lot of book talks, maybe even inviting teachers from around the school or other adults, the principal, the athletic director, adults that the kids respect to come into the room and talk about their favorite book. Maybe you've been doing first chapter Fridays, so you've been introducing a lot of little bits of different books to highlight, all the great pieces that are out there and just getting students more interested in your library and the whole idea of reading. Whatever you can think of to do that, you've just been building up that program on the side. Students are starting to respond to it all. They liked the performance poetry. They found the podcast intriguing. They fell for some of those first chapter Friday reads, maybe something super high interest like The Hunger Games or Scythe. Everyone has an independent reading book. Most kids are reading them during the daily 10 minutes. That's great. Now you're going to up the ante with today's lesson. So, the main gist of today's lesson is going to be introducing high-interest dystopia book clubs. Now, book clubs can be a great way to move students toward longer reads, especially if you're building on a growing success of your independent reading program so that students are already getting used to this idea of having choice and reading somewhat independently. So for today's lesson, we're going to be unveiling these high-interest dystopia book clubs. During the book clubs, in the future, students will meet in small groups 2 or 3 times a week to discuss what they're reading and do little related activities, mini lessons, projects. Since students are still building their reading stamina, you could break up the book club days into a combination of reading sprints to help kids get through more of their books while they're with you, while they're in class, so they can build their confidence, and book club meetings. A while ago, I interviewed a wonderful teacher, Caitlin Lohr, about how she did this with verse novel book clubs. And the idea is you're trying to help them do as much of the reading as possible in class. You maybe do however long you feel that they have the stamina for, and it can grow from class to class to do some of the reading, and then they get together and meet, or they get together and meet to read what they've read up to that point, and then they break off into their reading sprint to get ready for the next class. Now, dystopia book clubs are one of the resources I have designed for the Lighthouse. So if you're a Lighthouse member, you can use mine. If you want to create your own, that's great too. I'm just going to walk you through kind of how I would unveil them either way. So today's lesson is about introducing the texts for the book club and letting students do the book tasting. So before they come in, you're going to want to have the atmosphere ready for a book tasting. And the general practice for that is to pull your tables into sort of cafe-style seating, play some music. If you're up for it, maybe serve tea or cocoa, or if you're really up for it, like donut holes or something to make it extra a little bit fun. Now, this is a dystopia book tasting, so you might want to make it a little more dramatic and intense instead of cozy. You could choose like really intense instrumental music. You could darken the room a little. You could get black napkins, that kind of thing, just to make it like a little more dystopian. And then as students come in, I'd let them sit in that book club seating and start getting curious about what's going on. But instead of starting right away by bringing out all your books and doing the book tasting, I want you to start by introducing the concept of dystopia. Some kids are going to be familiar with it, some may not. Personally, I think film trailers are a great way to get kids warmed up to understand what dystopia is. There are so many fabulous dystopian film trailers. I'm going to suggest the ones for The Hunger Games, The Giver, Divergent, The Truman Show, Fahrenheit 451, and Mitchell's vs. Machines. Now, if you have older kids and you want to include it, The Matrix is great too, but that one is more mature. Then, if your students have tech, you can either let them explore like a choice board of these trailers with a partner or on their own with headphones, or you can play some of them for the class. As they're watching these trailers, here's what I want you to have them do. I want them to be noticing common elements of what they see across 3 categories: the storyline, the mood, and the setting. What do they notice that these trailers have in common in terms of their story, their mood, and their setting? And then once they've kind of jotted down some notes on that, wow, all of these kind of have a similar mood because this, or the setting, is like this, or whatever. Then bring them together and have them help you define what dystopia is. If all of these little 2-minute movie bites are dystopia, what does that mean about what dystopia is? Have them help you define it. Now you're ready to move to the next section here and say, we're going to do a book tasting of dystopian books. Now that you've figured out what dystopia is, we're actually going to be doing dystopian book clubs. And you can sort of bring out your stacks of books and start scattering them around. So you're going to put one type of book at each little cafe style seating. You can project up on your projector like a big dystopia book tasting screen with like flames around it. Flip on your music, let kids grab a tea or a coffee, and put your books out. Now, maybe you're wondering, thanks, Betsy, but what books are you talking about? This is what I'm going to recommend. Since you're trying to increase your reader's stamina, if that is a big concern for you and kids are not reading whole books and they won't read whole books, you probably want to use quite a few hook books in this unit. Now, does that mean that you don't want to ever stretch your kids? You don't want them ever to be reading hard books, classic books? No, that's not at all what I mean. But it's all about getting them on that like reading escalator, right? If they won't read a book and you hand them 1984, that's probably not going to be the first book they've read in 10 years. So what I'm going to suggest is that you consider books like The Hunger Games, Scythe, Divergent, The Maze Runner, The Giver, books that are really exciting right from the get-go, books that they're going to enjoy, books that they're going to want to turn the page on. Now, if some of your students are ready for a stretch, you could also incorporate books like Fahrenheit 451, 1984, Animal Farm, Snake Falls to Earth, and Brave New World. As always, you have to read your community. You have to look at these books and decide what works for you. By their very nature as dystopian novels, these books tend to be a bit heavy. A lot of them contain violence. So you do need to check and make sure that these books are going to be okay in your community. But those are the kind of titles I would be considering for these dystopian book clubs. Now you're ready to give them some time to explore all the different possibilities that you're laying out for them. So what I would suggest is that you demonstrate how to preview a book, which is like tasting a book, right? So go up to one of the books, sort of in front of all the students and say like, oh, this book looks interesting. Like, let me look at the front cover and then describe what you think of the cover. Like, oh, I like this. Oh, but this kind of turns me off. Maybe I'm not going to like this or whatever. And then you turn to the back cover and you read the back cover. You sort of demonstrate, okay, I'm getting the sense of the plot. If there's an inside cover, you can look at that. You could look at a page or two at the front, sort of flip through the chapters. Just show kids how you personally, like when you're at a bookstore or a library, preview a book and walk them through it out loud, because that may not be something that they've really experienced doing very much, especially if they haven't read a book in a really long time. So you're going to want to give students a little handout, some kind of graphic organizer to jot down their thoughts as they move through the books. And they're just basically going to be rating them, kind of, do I like this book? What do I like about it? This book reminds me of, maybe this other book that I liked. Is there anything about this book I don't like? And then maybe you make a place for them to give it stars out of 5 or a rating out of 10, or to color in like little emojis that either look bright and happy and interested or miserable and bored. And then by the end of your book tasting, students should have achieved a few things. Number one, hopefully you've kind of hooked them on this idea of dystopia. They're intrigued by dystopia. They watch these fun film trailers. They define what dystopia is. They're diving into dystopia. And then hopefully they're feeling excited about at least a couple of the book possibilities that they tasted. Now, as an exit ticket, I would suggest you have them take that graphic organizer that they finished, flip it over to the back, and just put their name and their top 2 or 3 choices for book clubs as their exit ticket. Now, if you don't want to deal with taking these sheets and defining your book club groups across a few different classes, which is some work for sure, what I've always done instead is to actually just have students at the end of sort of my preview of the books move to different corners of the room, or like you could have them move to the tables where they where the books are that they're really interested in, and just give yourself a chance to eyeball it. Like, if every single kid in the class goes to Scythe, then you're going to know, all right, maybe I have to collect these papers and define the groups based on their number 2 and number 3 choices. But if it's actually reasonably even if you have one book club that's a little bit small, but you see the people in it and you're like, okay, but they can make it work, you might be able to just give everyone their first choice. Or if you see, and I've done this as well, if you see that one group is really big and another group is smaller and then the rest are sort of medium, you can try to convince right there on the spot some of the kids in the big group to go to the group that you need more people in by pitching that book really hard. Like if you think that genuinely it's a great book and that kids just didn't realize it from their tasting, you could be like, oh, you guys, none of you chose Divergent. Like wait until you meet the Dauntless faction. Did you know that to become Dauntless, you have to leap off a building, blah, blah, blah. Like just kind of talk it up and see if a couple kids might be willing to switch. Say like if a couple of you are willing to go Dauntless and read Divergent, then everyone can have their first choice and just sort of see if they drift over there. If they don't, you can revert to plan A and run through their rankings and just assign everybody and try to give them their one or two. Okay, so that's the class for this one, plan my lesson. Obviously, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about building up students' reading stamina. But since we don't have hours and hours and hours, that's one class. Let's talk a little bit about the teaching takeaways. First of all, when you're planning any lesson, consider your space. For this stamina building push, building in a reading library and visual recommendations for great reads is a big part of building reading culture in the room. So how your space looks, what priorities it reflects can really make an impact on your reading culture. But you can do this with other areas of teaching too. If you're in a research unit, having like beautiful MLA posters on your wall that can help back up the kids who are struggling to remember citation format can be really helpful. If you're doing a lot of close reading and annotation, having colorful literary terms cards as a resource kids can grab anytime to remind themselves of all the terms to spread out on their desk when they're doing analysis, that can be a really helpful thing. If you're doing a lot of formal writing or creative writing, having a writing makerspace in your room with writing makerspace elements can help writers tackle any assignment. And once you've used those things a couple times, you can always be saying, these things are available to you. If this helps you structure your writing, feel free to visit the writing makerspace at any time. Next, keep in mind how well students respond to multimedia right now. Building in a few 2-minute film trailers in this lesson to help hook students into dystopia is a fun way to get them engaged and excited about the materials. Yet, it doesn't turn over much of class to watching a movie, right? It's not like we're spending an hour and a half watching a dystopian movie. We're spending like 7 minutes getting a little sound bite from 3 or 4 dystopian movies. There's really a lot of gold to be found on YouTube as long as you dig carefully. Next, there's the idea of book clubs. Whether you're going to do a high-interest dystopian book club or something else in terms of a book club, I really recommend that you think about building at least one into every course that you teach. If cost is a big issue for you, I get that. Work with your librarian and see if you can't get 10 copies of each book for 6 weeks through interlibrary loan. Again, when I interviewed Caitlin about her high-interest verse novel book clubs a couple of years ago, this was something she did with great success. Another way to get books is to use a Donors Choose project. It's summertime right now. If you're listening to this live, maybe hop on Donors Choose. Maybe there's a big corporation that's currently matching 50%. And if you can get a little bit of momentum with your project, you can actually get those book club books a lot cheaper than you think. Another option is to use First Book Marketplace, which can allow you to get books a lot cheaper than you might expect if you go to a school where a lot of your, or if you work at a school where a lot of your students are high need. So those are 3 ways that you can get around the issue of cost. Another option would be to work with other teachers at your school, see if people have kind of like old sets of books laying around from past times that they taught them, and they're not teaching them anymore. It's just kind of like if you can possibly get creative, it can be more possible than you think. The great thing about book clubs, actually there's a lot of great things, but one great thing about book clubs is that it allows you to bring more authors and more choice into your curriculum. And when students can find a book that feels right to them, maybe a character they can relate to, an author that they're excited about. That choice is a huge factor in encouraging readers and building their interest in books. If you want to know more about that, we have a past episode called Students Need Diverse Text and Choice that could be really helpful to you, where I interviewed a couple of wonderful professors on this. And I'm going to link it in the full show notes at nowsparkcreativity.com. Okay, I can't not talk about meeting students where they are here while we're talking about teaching takeaways. I once taught a class of sophomores that was heavily filled with developing bilingual students. It was such a fabulous class. I loved teaching them. They were amazing, dynamic. They were a fun group to teach. We really enjoyed our choice reading program in that class. But I felt that they were really hurt by the required text in the class, and I really fought to try to shift some of their requirements, and I wasn't able to do so, but I still remember kind of the pain of it. Each day when I would come in and I would be talking with them about Dante's Inferno or the Canterbury Tales, I couldn't do a whole lot beyond simply explaining what just happened. I felt like a translator, right? The class was trying so hard. They had great attitudes. I think a lot of the class liked reading, but they would open Dante's Inferno and just not understand the language at all. And so I felt like they were ready to use their growing skills, their interest in English to interpret text and discuss ideas. And instead I was just like, and then this is happening. And then this part means this, because we didn't have the right text for them. I wasn't able to meet them where they were on the reading escalator with their language skills, with the book text or like with the course text. And so if I could have done a book club unit, I could have included more of a range. I could have put students who were ready for for the classics, for books that were going to really stretch them with language. I could have pushed those kids toward those books, but I could have provided like all different options and tried to help students who really needed a high interest read or who really needed a read that they were going to be able to understand a little better. I could have made those options available. If kids still wanted to push themselves towards like the really harder books, I could have helped them to do that. But I think if we can meet kids where they are and help them to really fall in love with reading, to be interested in the book they're reading, to want to go home and read it, to read it on the bus, to read it at tennis practice, all the things, it makes such an impact on their overall arc. But if you meet a kid who's really struggling, who hasn't read a book in a long time for a whole range of reasons, and you're like, here, let's read Anna Karenina, it's just, it's not meeting them where they are. And I really think if your goal is to build stamina in your readers, a lot of their reading needs to come from choice and be of real interest to them. And over time, and I've watched it happen, they naturally start choosing harder books. They naturally are interested to read really challenging books. They want to know more about the classics, but they need the time to get there. That's what I think. That's what I believe. Okay, finally, never underestimate the fun of a little change of pace in your courses, like a book tasting. Changing up your seating, adding a little music, projecting a fun image on your screen, maybe bringing in a snack. Those things all just like create a little zippy pizzazz in your class. And it's like this special moment that helps build interest in what's coming next. It's memorable. It's something that can help get students excited. Okay, my friend, thank you so much for joining me today for the fourth in our summer series of Plan My Lesson episodes. If you'd like to listen back to the first three, we talked about Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, Jason Reynolds' Long Way Down, and Ken Liu's wonderful short story, The Paper Menagerie, in our last three episodes. So be sure to take a peek back if those are of interest. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.
There's help for when you need print and go creativity for your classroom. There's help when you feel like all you have time to do is dash off comprehension questions, and that's just not the way you want to teach. Did you know I have a curriculum membership for creative ELA teachers? It's like the assistant you've always wished for, the curriculum you need, ready to adapt to your specific classroom. This is my 5th year running the Lighthouse, and I've learned so much from the 2,000 plus teachers who have joined me there, and it just keeps getting better. If you're a secondary ELA teacher looking for more creativity in class without your work bag following you around like a shadow, and you want a creative community that gets what you go through every day, the Lighthouse is waiting for you. This is the program where you get immediate access to curriculum across more than 30 themes, like podcasting, one-pagers, argument, choice reading, book clubs, poetry, and short stories. This is the program where you get a sub-plan library you can lean on anytime you need a day, for any reason. This is the program where you'll find a creative community waiting to cheer your wins and share fresh ideas day after day. This is the program where you'll find on-demand video workshops from leaders across our field, like Penny Kittle and John Spencer. This is the program where I share everything I create. This is the program where we go all in. Are you ready to explore how the Lighthouse can transform your teaching? Make sure you're signed up for my weekly creative teaching emails so you'll get your invitation the next time the doors open.